They used to scream my name like I was a god. Every night, the lights, the noise, the fame, it felt like heaven. But when the crowd disappeared, I realized I had been living in hell. I had the world at my feet, money, women, power, everything people dream about. But inside, I was empty. No matter how loud the music was, it couldn't silence the voice in my head whispering, "You're nothing without it." So I drowned that voice in alcohol, then in pills, then in anything that could numb the guilt. But nothing ever worked. Not the parties, not the penthouses, not the fake friends who said they loved me, because the truth was simple. The world loved my image, but God loved my soul. And when the world forgot me, He didn't. The night I almost died was the night He saved me. They used to scream my name like it could save them. Every night, I'd walk out to a sea of lights, thousands of phones glowing like constellations, the roar of people shaking the air until it vibrated in my chest. That sound used to feel like love. Now, I know it was noise, beautiful, deafening noise hiding the emptiness inside me. When you live on stage long enough, you forget what silence sounds like. The first time I felt real silence again was years later in a hospital bed, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Back then, the world called me a legend. I had a jet with my initials stitched into the leather seats, a mansion that overlooked the Pacific, where the ocean looked like a mirror I never wanted to look into, endorsements, magazine covers, fans who tattooed my lyrics on their skin. I thought that meant I mattered. Every night after the show, I'd stand at the edge of the stage and raise my hands like a preacher, and the crowd would scream. It felt holy, until I realized I was worshipping myself. The drugs started small. A friend, or maybe the devil wearing my friend's face, once said, "You need something to take the edge off." He wasn't wrong. The pressure, the eyes, the expectation, it all pressed down until I couldn't breathe. A pill helped me sleep. A line helped me wake. Soon, I wasn't sure which side of the day I was on. I learned to smile through it, to laugh at interviews, to sign autographs, to pretend the black rings under my eyes were from studio nights, not from shaking withdrawals. When the cameras turned off, I turned into someone I didn't recognize. There was one night in Miami I'll never forget. We'd just finished a show, 50,000 people, fireworks, a stage that looked like heaven made of LEDs. I walked backstage, drenched in sweat, heart racing. A woman kissed me before I even knew her name. Champagne spilled on the floor. Everyone was laughing, shouting, celebrating me, but in the middle of it all, I felt invisible. I went back to the hotel suite. Room service had left a bottle of whiskey and a note that said, "You deserve it." That night I drank until the city outside blurred into streaks of gold and blue. Somewhere between the fourth glass and the fifth, I thought about calling my mother, but it was 3 a.m. and I hadn't spoken to her in months. I stared at the phone, whispered "tomorrow," and poured another drink instead. Tomorrow never came. When you chase pleasure long enough, pain learns your address. My mornings turned into afternoons. Breakfast became vodka with orange juice. I stopped writing songs. The label hired people to write for me. I just showed up to sing, then disappeared into whatever darkness waited behind the curtain. One afternoon, my manager found me passed out on the floor. He said, "You need help." I said, "I need space." He left, and so did everyone else. That was the beginning of the end. Not one big explosion, just a quiet collapse. Fame doesn't end with a bang. It ends with an echo. There's a difference between loneliness and being alone. Being alone is when no one's around. Loneliness is when you're surrounded by people who don't see you. I remember sitting in a limousine after another show. City lights flashing across the tinted windows. My reflection stared back, hollow eyes, skin pale, jaw tight from whatever poison was running through my veins. I whispered to no one, "Why do they love me? They don't even know me." No answer came, just the low hum of the engine. Outside, fans chased the car. Inside, I was chasing something else. Peace, maybe, or just the silence I'd lost. That night I overdosed for the first time. They called it dehydration in the tabloids. I called it a warning, but I didn't listen. Months blurred, cities melted together, every show felt like the same night repeating. I'd walk on stage to applause and walk off to emptiness. I thought if I just made more money, filled bigger venues, slept with prettier people, maybe the hole would close. It never did. You can't fill a soul with things that die. One night in Los Angeles, I was late to my own performance. I'd been up for 2 days, sweating, trembling. The makeup artist asked if I was okay. I said, of course, I'm always okay. That was the biggest lie I ever told. When I walked out, the lights were so bright they burned. I couldn't see the crowd. It felt like I was singing into a void. Halfway through the set, my knees buckled. The band kept playing. The audience thought it was part of the act, but I collapsed behind the curtain before the encore. Backstage chaos, paramedics, cameras flashing, someone shouting my name, everything blurred into white. When I woke up, I was in a hospital. The beeping machines sounded like a slow metronome counting down what was left of me. A nurse said softly, "You're lucky to be alive." I wanted to tell her it didn't feel like luck. They sent me home with pills to calm the shakes and numbers for rehab clinics. I ignored both. Within a week, I was back in the clubs. Same faces, same lies. Every time someone recognized me, I felt smaller. They saw the image, not the man. One morning, I woke to find a headline, "Is Elias Carter losing control?" I laughed. They thought I was losing control. Truth was, I'd lost it long ago. That day, I smashed every mirror in my house. I couldn't stand seeing the stranger staring back. The spiral got faster. More drugs, more nights without sleep, more people telling me I was fine while watching me burn. I began hearing whispers when I was alone. Not real voices, but my conscience clawing to be heard. Sometimes in those moments before dawn, I'd feel something tug inside me, like a memory of peace I couldn't name. Maybe it was God knocking. Maybe it was my soul begging for air. I pushed it away with another hit. The night that changed everything wasn't glamorous. No cameras, no fans, no stage. Just me, a hotel room, and the end of myself. I remember the smell, sweat, alcohol, the faint sweetness of powder. The curtains were drawn, the world outside silent. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling, staring at the little bag on the nightstand. I told myself, just one more, then I'll stop. The same lie I'd told 1,000 times. As I leaned over the mirror, I caught my reflection. Red eyes, cracked lips, face I barely knew. And I hated him, not for what he'd done, but for what he'd become. I whispered, "God, if you're real, this is your last chance." Then everything went black. They said I was clinically dead for 2 minutes. I don't remember the hospital, the lights, the doctors, only the silence. For the first time in years, there was no noise, no crowd, no music, just peace. It felt alive. I can't explain it, but I knew I wasn't alone. There was a presence, warm, overwhelming, gentle, not judgmental, not angry. Just love, the kind I'd been chasing but never found. A voice, not out loud but deep within, said, "You don't belong here yet." Then, "I'm not done with you." And in that moment, I saw flashes. My mother praying in her kitchen, a verse I'd ignored as a child, the face of every person I'd hurt. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my body. The machine screamed, nurses ran in, and I gasped for air like a newborn. The doctor said, "Welcome back," but I knew it wasn't them who brought me back. Lying there, tubes in my arms, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Gratitude, not for surviving, but for being seen, for being known by someone who didn't care about my charts or my fame, someone who cared about me. When they discharged me, I didn't go home. I drove to a park outside the city, sat on a bench, and cried until the sun came up. For once, the tears weren't from pain. They were from release. I wasn't healed, not yet. The cravings, the guilt, the memories, they still haunted me. But there was a spark now, a whisper that said, "This isn't the end." And somehow, I believed it. That was the night the noise stopped and the silence began, the kind of silence where God speaks. When you wake up from the edge of death, the world looks the same but feels completely different. The air tastes heavier, colors hurt your eyes, every sound reminds you that you're still here, and you can't decide if that's a blessing or a punishment. The hospital smell stayed in my clothes for days, disinfectant, metal, and regret. They released me with a stack of prescriptions and a counselor's card I never called. Instead, I drove for hours with no destination, windows down, radio off. For the first time in years, there was no music, just the wind, and that still, persistent whisper inside me. I didn't know if it was God. I only knew it wasn't me. Every billboard I passed had my face on it, smiling, flawless, fake. I hated that man. He'd taken everything from me. My peace, my friends, my soul. Somewhere along the highway, I pulled over and screamed until my throat bled. Not out of anger, out of exhaustion. I was tired of pretending to be alive. For a week, I hid in a cheap motel near the desert. No cameras, no entourage, no noise. Just me. A Bible the nurse had slipped into my bag, and silence. At night, I'd stare at it on the table, afraid to open it, like it might judge me. On the third night, withdrawal hit hard, sweating, shaking, craving. I wanted a drink so badly my hands wouldn't stop twitching. That's when I picked up the Bible, not to read, but to hold. It felt heavier than I expected. I whispered, "If you're real, show me something." Nothing happened. No lightning, no angels, no booming voice. Just silence, and the faint comfort of not being completely alone. When I finally opened it, the page fell to Isaiah 43:2. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned." I cried. Not because I believed it yet, but because I wanted to. Days blurred together. Sunrises I didn't deserve, nights I couldn't sleep. I'd walk to a diner at the edge of town where no one recognized me. The waitress, Maria, called me Hon and never asked questions. She had kind eyes, the kind that saw through your lies but didn't expose them. One morning, she noticed my trembling hands. "You detoxing?" she asked gently. I nodded. She poured more coffee and said, "Then you're fighting for something. Don't stop." Those words hit harder than any lyric I'd ever written. For the first time, someone wasn't praising me for who I'd been. She was encouraging who I might become. That night, I dreamed. Not one of those chaotic, drug-fueled dreams, but something painfully clear. I was standing on the same stage where I'd collapsed months before. The crowd was gone, the lights were off, only one spotlight burned, aimed straight at me. From the darkness came a voice, calm, steady, familiar. "I gave you a gift. You used it to fill the world, but not your heart." I fell to my knees, sobbing. The voice continued, "I didn't save you to perform, I saved you to live." Then the light dimmed and I woke up gasping. The room was cold, but my chest was warm, like someone had touched it. I couldn't explain it, but I knew God had just spoken in the only language I could understand. Silence. I started walking every morning before sunrise. At first, it was just to keep the cravings away, but soon those walks became prayers. Simple ones, broken ones. "Help me. Stay. Don't leave again." One morning, I saw an old man sitting by the bus stop reading a small Bible. He looked up and smiled. "You lost?" he asked. "Something like that?" He nodded. "Then you're closer than you think." I sat beside him. We didn't speak again. But for those few minutes, I felt seen, Maybe God hides in ordinary people because he knows celebrities like me never learned to listen to quiet voices. Temptation didn't vanish. It waited. On my 7th day clean, a friend from LA found my number. "Come back, man," he said. "We've got deals, money, the tour. Your fans miss you." My pulse quickened. Part of me still craved the spotlight. Then I glanced at the Bible on the nightstand, opened to that verse from Isaiah. The paper trembled under the ceiling fan. I hung up. That night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace that didn't come from a bottle. The silence became sacred. I began talking to God like he was sitting across the room. No fancy words, just honesty. Why me? Why save someone who wasted everything? No thunder answered, but in my chest a whisper, "Because you were never mine to lose." I broke again, not from pain, but from love I couldn't understand. Every tear felt like cleansing fire, burning away the lies I'd built my life on. I wrote letters to everyone I'd hurt, apologies I might never send. Each one felt like peeling off another layer of poison, and with every word, I could breathe a little more. Weeks later, Maria handed me a small note with my coffee. "You should visit Pastor John at the old chapel on 3rd Street. I laughed. "You think church can fix this?" She smiled. "No, but maybe God can." I didn't go that day, but that night I couldn't sleep. Something kept pulling at me, gentle but relentless. By morning, I found myself outside the chapel. It was small, cracked paint, a wooden cross barely hanging. Inside, the air smelled like candles and forgiveness. I sat in the back pew, arms crossed, heart pounding. The pastor was older, soft-spoken, reading from Luke 15, the story of the prodigal son. Every word felt like it was written about me. When he said, "But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and ran to him," I broke. I didn't even know I was crying until I felt my hands shaking. After the service, the pastor approached me quietly. "Son," he said, "sometimes the far country isn't a place. It's a heart that forgot home." I nodded, speechless. He didn't press. He just said, "Come back anytime. God already has." That night, I knelt by the motel bed. No cameras, no audience, no spotlight, just me and the God I'd ignored for years. Words stumbled out between tears. "I can't fix this, I can't fix me, but if you still want me, I'm yours." The room didn't glow. No voice thundered from heaven, but something shifted, like chains falling, invisible but real. For the first time, I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. The next morning, sunlight filled the room through the blinds. I made coffee, took a deep breath, and realized the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full, alive, with something sacred. I didn't know what the future held. I only knew who held me. I opened the Bible again. This time the page fell to Psalm 42. "He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand." I whispered, "Thank you," and meant it. When you've spent years running from yourself, slowing down feels like dying. Silence becomes too loud. Peace feels unnatural, and forgiveness almost impossible. But that's exactly where God began rebuilding me. Not in fame, not in power, but in stillness. I stayed in that small motel for weeks. Every day started the same. A simple prayer, a slow walk, a cup of bad coffee that somehow tasted like grace. There were no fans, no flashing lights, no stage. And for once, I didn't miss them. The cravings still came, sometimes like whispers, sometimes like storms. But each time they hit, I'd grab the Bible, read a verse, and breathe until the shaking stopped. I wasn't strong. God was. And somehow, that was enough. One morning, I walked back to the little chapel on 3rd Street. Pastor John saw me and smiled, like he'd been expecting me all along. "Good to see you again, son," he said. "I wasn't sure I'd come back," I admitted. He chuckled softly. That's what we all say before we realize we never really left. I didn't understand it then, but I would. The pastor introduced me to a small group that met every Tuesday night. Recovering addicts, broken families, lost souls like me. We sat in a circle of folding chairs, drinking cheap coffee and telling the truth. That first night, I barely spoke. I just listened. To the woman who lost her son to an overdose, to the man who spent 10 years in prison and still carried the guilt, to the teenager who said, "I just want to feel enough." Something broke open inside me, a quiet realization that I wasn't alone. Pain had always made me feel like I was the only one drowning, but in that room, surrounded by stories that sounded too much like my own, I realized we were all treading the same water, and God was the lifeboat. When it was finally my turn to speak, the words came out shaky. "My name's Elias," I said, "and I've been running for a long time." No one applauded. No one looked shocked. They just nodded, like they understood exactly what that meant. For the first time, I didn't feel like a headline. I felt human. Days turned into weeks, and little by little, life returned. I found a small apartment near the edge of town. The place was old, cracked walls, leaky faucet, but it was mine. I bought a plant and named it Grace, mostly because I wanted to prove I could keep something alive. At night, I'd write in a journal Pastor John gave me. Not songs, just thoughts, prayers, apologies, gratitude. The pages began to fill, and so did my heart. But healing isn't linear. Some days, I woke up hopeful. Others, I couldn't even look in the mirror. The guilt was the hardest part. It whispered, "You don't deserve forgiveness." And sometimes I believed it. One night I told Pastor John about it. He listened quietly, then said, "Elias, guilt reminds us of what we've done. Grace reminds us of what he's done. Stop confusing the two." I didn't reply, but that sentence carved itself into my soul. A few months later, Maria, the waitress who'd been kind to me when no one else was, called. "I heard you're doing better," she said. "Trying to," I laughed. "Well, maybe you should try saying sorry too," she replied. Her tone wasn't harsh. It was honest, and she was right. I'd left a trail of broken people behind me, managers, friends, bandmates. My mother. The thought of facing them made me sick, but the truth of redemption is this. You can't walk forward without turning back. So I started small. I called my old drummer, Mark. We hadn't spoken in years. When he picked up, the silence between us was heavy. Then I said, "I'm sorry for everything." He was quiet for a long time before whispering, "Me too, brother." That was it. No long speeches, no grand gesture, just forgiveness, simple and unearned, the way God gives it. The hardest call was to my mother. Her number was still saved in my phone under Home. It took me 3 days to build the courage to dial it. When she answered, I froze. Her voice was older, softer. "Elias," she said. I broke. Tears came before words. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. The silence, the pain, the shame." She didn't scold me. She didn't ask why. She just said, "I've been praying for this call for years." We talked for hours about faith, about healing, about the boy she raised and the man she believed I still could be. When the call ended, I sat there staring at the phone, feeling lighter than I had in a decade. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It redeems it. One Sunday, Pastor John asked if I'd share my story with the congregation. The thought terrified me. "I'm not ready," I said. He smiled. "None of us ever are. That's why God does the talking." So I did. I stood at the front of that small church, voice trembling, and told the truth. The fame, the fall, the overdose, the silence that saved me. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then, slowly, people began to clap. Not for me, for what God had done. After the service, a young man approached me. He couldn't have been older than 20. He said, "I was thinking about ending my life last week, but after hearing you, I think I'll give God one more chance." That moment changed everything. I realized my story wasn't mine anymore, it was his. Over the following months, doors started opening I hadn't even knocked on. Rehabilitation centers invited me to speak. Churches reached out. Even a few old friends from the industry came, curious about what had changed. I never prepared a script. I just spoke from the place where pain had once lived. Every word was a scar turned testimony. I didn't try to be a preacher. I just told people what I knew. That the same God who found me in a hotel room surrounded by death could find them too. And that no matter how far you run, grace runs faster. But not everyone celebrated. The media caught on eventually. Fallen star finds faith. Some mocked me, others doubted me. A few tabloids even said it was a publicity stunt. That used to bother me. Now I just prayed for them. Because when you've truly met God, other people's opinions stop being chains. One evening, I found myself driving past the stadium where I used to perform. The marquee still had my name, old posters, faded by time. I parked across the street and sat there for a long time. That building had once been my temple, now it was just concrete. I whispered, "Thank you for breaking me there, so you could rebuild me here." The air felt holy, not because of where I was, but because of who was with me. I wish I could say everything stayed perfect after that. It didn't. Temptation never really dies, it just waits for weak moments. Some nights, I still heard the old songs in my head, the cheers, the noise. But now, instead of reaching for a bottle, I reached for the book, and every time I opened it, I found strength waiting for me. One verse in particular became my anchor. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9. I used to think strength meant control. Now I know it means surrender. A year later, I was invited to speak at a massive church event in Dallas, thousands of people. It felt strange, standing under lights again, hearing the low murmur of a crowd waiting. But this time, the lights didn't blind me. They reminded me of what he'd brought me through. As I walked on stage, I took a deep breath and smiled. Not the fake kind I'd worn for cameras. A real one, born from peace. I said, I used to chase applause, but now I chase truth. And the truth is, God didn't just save me, He resurrected me. The crowd stood, clapping, crying, worshipping. And as I looked out at them, I saw myself, all the broken, searching, desperate versions of who I'd been. I whispered, "Thank you, Jesus," and meant every word. That night I didn't feel like a star, I felt like a sun. Every miracle is followed by a test. Sometimes it comes in whispers, sometimes it wears a smile. But it always asks the same question. Now that you've been set free, what will you do with your freedom? It had been a year since I'd left the industry, since I'd found peace in small rooms instead of stadiums. My days were simple: prayer, scripture, community. I even started volunteering at the rehab center downtown, sharing my story with people who were exactly where I'd once been. And yet deep down, I could feel it. A faint pull. The echo of the stage calling me again. Not as music, but as memory. The applause, the lights, the adrenaline, they weren't sins on their own, but for me, they were chains waiting to tighten again. I told myself I could handle it now, that I was different, that I was healed. But pride is a liar that speaks fluently in the language of progress. One morning, I got an email from an old music executive named Daniel. He'd been one of the few who hadn't completely cut me off during my downfall. The subject line read, "Just one night," he wrote, "Elias, we're doing a charity concert in LA. Recovery awareness, clean music, no drugs, no parties. I thought it'd be poetic for you to close the night. One song, one message. It sounded harmless, it sounded holy even. But the second I read it, my chest tightened. A war began inside me, the redeemed man versus the one who'd once bowed to fame. I prayed for days. I told God I didn't want to go back, but a small voice whispered, "Maybe you can use it for good." That's the danger of temptation. It rarely looks evil. It looks like purpose wrapped in ego. When I landed in LA, the smell of the city hit me like a ghost from my past. Expensive perfume, burnt rubber, ambition. Billboards with my old photos still hung like echoes of a dead life. I almost turned around and flew back, but something inside me, pride, nostalgia, maybe both, said, "You can handle it now." At rehearsal, everyone treated me like royalty. "Elias, you look amazing, man. You're glowing. You must be living right." I smiled politely, but each compliment felt like poison coated in sugar. That night, alone in the hotel, I looked in the mirror and saw two men. The one God had raised from the ashes, and the one who secretly missed the fire. The next evening, I stepped onto the stage. Thousands of people, bright lights, a massive screen behind me playing clips from my past tours. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Lord, use me." But as the music began, something shifted. The cheers grew louder, the old rhythm, the muscle memory, the ego, all of it came flooding back. I sang the song, but halfway through I realized I wasn't worshiping. I was performing for them, for myself, not for him. When the final chord hit, the crowd exploded in applause. I smiled, but inside I felt sick. The same sick that once drove me to destroy myself. Fame hadn't changed. It just waited for me to come home. After the show, Daniel hugged me. "You killed it, man. You're back." His words pierced me. Back. The one word I never wanted to hear again. I forced a smile. "Thanks." He handed me a card. "There's a label meeting tomorrow morning. Everyone's talking about a comeback. Just think about it." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, city lights flickering below, and prayed. "God, I thought I was stronger than this." The answer came in silence, the kind that hurts because you know the truth before he even says it. I wasn't healed. I was just sober. There's a difference. The next morning, I went to the meeting anyway. Part curiosity, part pride. The office was sleek, modern, glass walls, expensive art, and people who smiled too much. They spoke about tours, documentaries, millions. "Your story is powerful," one executive said. "We could sell redemption." Sell redemption. Two words that made my stomach turn. They didn't want my faith. They wanted my scars. They wanted the miracle without the Messiah. I stood up mid-meeting. "Gentlemen," I said, "I already sold my soul once. I'm not taking it off the market again." I walked out before they could reply. It felt good. It felt holy. It also felt lonely. On the flight home, I watched the sunrise from the window seat. For the first time, I understood what Jesus meant when he said, "What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul?" I'd lived that verse and almost died by it. When I landed, Pastor John was waiting at the terminal. "How was it?" he asked. "Loud," I said. He smiled knowingly. "That's why he calls us to the quiet." We didn't talk much on the drive, but I could feel peace returning like oxygen after drowning. The next Sunday, I shared what happened with the church. I didn't hide the struggle. I told them how temptation doesn't knock. It remembers the spare key you left under the mat. People cried. Not because I fell, but because I got back up, because grace still works on broken ground. After the service, an inmate from the local prison who'd been granted day release came up to me. He said, "Man, I'm still behind bars, but after hearing you, I don't feel trapped anymore." I hugged him and whispered, "Neither do I." That moment reminded me, freedom isn't the absence of walls, it's the presence of God inside them. Weeks passed, the world forgot the concert, the tabloids moved on, And I found joy in the small things again: morning coffee, quiet prayers, letters from people who said my story gave them hope. One night, I visited the rehab center again. A young musician sat in the corner, trembling. He recognized me and said, "I just want to stop." I smiled. "You can't stop alone, but I know someone who never quits." We prayed together until he stopped shaking. When he looked up, tears streaked his face. "Is it really that simple?" he asked. "No," I said softly. "It's that miraculous." Months later, Daniel called again. He said, "You sure you're done? People still ask for you." I laughed. "Tell them I'm not gone, I just switched stages. Now my audience is smaller. Prison halls, churches, shelters. But the applause, it's heaven's echo. Every time someone says, 'Your story gave me hope,' I hear angels in that. I still write songs sometimes, but now they sound like prayers. One of them begins with the words, 'I lost everything I loved to find the one who loved me first.' That song never charted, but it changed lives. And that's a better kind of fame. Looking back, I realized God didn't test me to break me again. He tested me to prove what he'd already built, a faith that doesn't depend on stages or crowds, a faith that can worship in silence. Because freedom isn't found in leaving your past behind. It's found in knowing your past no longer owns you. And when I close my eyes at night, I still hear music, not the kind that fills arenas, but the kind that fills hearts. The sound of redemption playing softly in the key of grace. They say when God calls you, it's not always with thunder or trumpets. Sometimes it's a whisper that sounds a lot like peace. And after all the noise I'd lived through, the concerts, the chaos, the addiction, the silence of prison, peace felt like the loudest sound in the world. It had been 2 years since that night in Los Angeles, 2 years since I walked away from fame for good. I still got offers. Private concerts, interviews, documentaries. But I learned that when God delivers you from something, you don't flirt with it again just to prove you're free. My new life was quieter but fuller. I woke up early, prayed, cooked breakfast, and went wherever I was needed. Rehabs, halfway houses, shelters. Some days I'd sing, other days I'd just listen. Either way, it felt like worship. One morning I got an email from a pastor in Atlanta. He'd seen a clip of my testimony online. "Brother Elias," he wrote, "we're hosting a youth revival. Thousands of kids, many are lost like you once were. Come tell them what God can do." I almost said no. Crowds still scared me, not because of people, but because of me. But something in my spirit whispered, "Go." So I packed a small bag, tucked my old Bible inside, and caught the first flight. The event was held in a stadium, the same kind of place that once fed my ego. When I walked through the tunnel, memories hit like lightning. The roar of fans, the flash of cameras, the false sense of immortality. But now, the lights felt different, softer, holy, as if heaven had replaced the spotlight. Backstage, the pastor greeted me with a hug. "You ready, brother?" I smiled nervously. I'm not, but he is. As I stepped onto the stage, I didn't see faces, just souls. Thousands of them, some smiling, some broken, some pretending not to be. And suddenly, I knew exactly what to say. I told them about the nights I'd drowned in pleasure and still couldn't fill the void, about the money that couldn't buy peace, about the fame that made me invisible. And then I told them about the God who found me when no one else was looking. You could hear a pin drop. Then a wave of sobs and prayers swept across the crowd like a wind. It wasn't a concert, it was a homecoming. After the event, a teenager. He looked nervous, holding a crumpled piece of paper. "I wrote you a letter," he said. "I was gonna end my life tonight, but after hearing you, I think I'll give God a chance first." I took the paper, but my hands were shaking too much to read it. So I just hugged him and whispered, "You just gave me a reason to keep going too." When he walked away, I realized something sacred. God doesn't just save us for ourselves. He saves us to become proof that He's still saving. That night, as I sat in my hotel room, I cried, not from guilt this time, but gratitude. For the first time, I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted to be faithful. The next year, doors opened faster than I could knock. Prisons, schools, churches. People wanted to hear how God had turned pain into purpose. I traveled light. One suitcase, one Bible, one story. In one prison, a man with tattoos on his face said, "I heard you were one of us once." I nodded. "Still am. The only difference is now I'm free." He laughed, but tears filled his eyes. When I prayed for him, he dropped to his knees. Right there in that cold cell, I watched another soul resurrect. That's when it hit me. Freedom isn't contagious because of words. It spreads through witness, through scars that refuse to stay silent. One night, I returned to my hometown, the place where it all started and where I'd first picked up a microphone, first picked up a needle, and eventually first picked up a Bible. The church there had invited me to speak. It was the same building my mother used to pray in when I was out chasing sin. She was there that night, sitting in the front row, eyes shining with pride and tears. I began with a simple sentence. Every time I thought my story was over, God added another chapter. People cried, some laughed, some shouted, "Amen." I looked at my mother and for the first time saw not disappointment, but peace. When the service ended, she hugged me and whispered, "I knew He'd bring you home." I told her, "He didn't just bring me home, Mom. He brought me back to life." Months later, I released something new, not an album, but a project called Grace Notes. It wasn't music for charts, just testimonies in song. Each track told a story of freedom, not mine, but others. Addicts, widows, ex-cons, broken people who'd met the same Redeemer I did. The songs didn't make me rich, but they made heaven louder. A famous producer once called and said, "This is powerful stuff, Elias. We could make millions if we polished it up." I told him, "It's already polished, by tears and prayer." He didn't call back, and I didn't mind. Somewhere along the journey, I realized I wasn't a singer anymore. I was a storyteller, a messenger, a living proof that grace doesn't just cover sin. It transforms sinners into servants. I started mentoring young artists, kids drowning in the same illusion I once called success. We'd sit in small rooms, guitars in hand, and I'd tell them, "If your song doesn't make heaven smile, it's not worth singing." They listened. Some cried. Some even gave their lives to Christ on the spot. That was my new stage. Not arenas, but hearts. But God wasn't done. One night I had a dream. I was standing on a mountain, holding my old microphone, but instead of a crowd below, there were thousands of candles flickering, each one representing a soul touched by His love. As I raised the mic, the candles grew brighter until the whole sky looked like daylight. I woke up in tears, and I knew what it meant. The stage may have changed, but the mission hadn't. So I prayed, "Use me, Lord, wherever, however, until my last breath." Years later, they made a documentary about my story. Not to glorify me, but to glorify Him. The title was simple, "The God Who Found Me." It opened with my old footage, wild parties, empty eyes, hollow fame, and ended with me preaching inside a prison chapel, hands raised, surrounded by men who once thought they were forgotten. When it premiered, I didn't attend the red carpet. I was in a halfway house across town, leading worship for 10 recovering addicts. One of them looked at me and said, "Man, I want to know that Jesus you talk about." I smiled. "Good news, He already knows you." Now, when I look back, I don't see a fallen star. I see a rescued son. Every scar, every failure, every night on the floor was part of a melody I didn't know I was singing. If fame taught me how to perform, grace taught me how to live. And if the world once applauded my destruction, heaven now rejoices in my redemption. When people ask me how I made it, I tell them the truth. I didn't climb out, He reached in. A few months ago, I returned to that same stadium where I once performed for millions, but this time, it wasn't a concert. It was a revival. Tens of thousands of people gathered, worshipping, weeping, surrendering. As I walked on stage, I looked up at the lights, the same ones that used to blind me, and whispered, "Thank you for breaking me just enough to let the light in." And when I began to sing, I didn't sing for fame. I sang for freedom, because the world needs to know no one is too far gone, no sin too dark, no soul too lost. The same God who met me in the pit still walks into prisons, rehabs, and hotel rooms today, looking for another name to write into his story. That night, as the crowd lifted their hands, I saw it. The miracle I'd been chasing all my life. Not applause, not recognition, but the simple, sacred sound of souls returning home. And I realized something I'll never forget. The real stage isn't made of wood and lights. It's built inside every heart that lets God perform his greatest act: redemption.